Three, two, one, here we go. RAINMAN'S Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Hey, everybody, it's the Rain Man. Just want to give a quick shout out to everybody watching. Thank you very much. I know you're going to find this next interview thought-provoking. I enjoy spending time with people like my next guest and getting into more detail about the subject matter, and I know you appreciate that as well. So go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. That way we can continue bringing you great content in the future. So thanks again for being part of Rain Man's Take, and enjoy the interview. Welcoming my guest, Chris Steer. Chris, how you doing?
I am great, Brian. Thank you for having me, brother.
Oh, no problem. Chris is the owner of Steer LLC, which is a business development group that focuses on leadership of small to mid-sized companies. And I wanted to have Chris on today for a couple of reasons. One, to catch up because we're old friends, and two, to talk leadership, how it's developed, how can you train somebody to be a good leader, etc. So, Chris, thanks again for joining me.
No, it's my pleasure. This is a topic that you and I have probably felt very strongly about and connected with starting probably close to 30 years ago, if you can believe that.
I know, isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? So, and before we get going, and this is just kind of a public service announcement to everybody out there, just so you know, you can get Rain Man's Take not only on YouTube, but also the audio version of each podcast episode everywhere where you find your podcast. So definitely keep an eye out for that if you don't have time to sit down and watch us on YouTube. So what Chris was just alluding to there, and I guess we'll just start from there, is we played lacrosse together at Johns Hopkins way back in the day. And I guess first and foremost, dude, good start to the season.
Yeah, a win is a great way to start it off. So let's go.
I know, I love it. It's fun to watch it out here because usually it's at 10 a.m. and usually it's, especially now where I guess it was really cold last weekend in Baltimore. And of course I'm watching it in shorts, drinking my coffee, just getting up.
10 a.m. That's like English Premier League time for me.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get up at 3 a.m. to go to the bar and watch the soccer game. I love it. All right, so let's start from way back when. So give me a little bit of your background. Let's talk so you and I were together when I was a senior at Hopkins. You were a freshman. So let's kind of take it from your senior year at Hopkins and then kind of push kind of all the way through to when you started the concept of Steer LLC.
Sure. So first and foremost, a tip of the cap to you, my friend, because when I still remember, as though it was yesterday, my first day on the campus at Johns Hopkins University, and this would have been in the fall of 1991. And the first member of the team that my roommate, Dan Evans, and I met was none other than Brian Lucas, and who came in as a co-captain and came into our room that very first day and set the tone. And so I will tell you, Brian, that you have influenced me more than you ever know or knew in terms of setting a standard for what good looks like as a leader. And I think there's probably no better crucible to learn about leadership than in team sports. Now, take that to the next level of playing team sports at Johns Hopkins. Take it to the next level of playing lacrosse at Johns Hopkins when we played lacrosse there. And it was just an unbelievable petri dish of just testing and learning about what good leadership really looks like. And I have to say, that's probably when my interest really generated in a material way as to what does good leadership, what do good teams, what do good organizations look like?
And you know, and I've actually been fascinated with it as well. And we're going to obviously talk about all of this. Really, there's an art to it, and there's also a science to it. And when I got into the Marine Corps, that's when they really sort of the science of developing a leader and actual things that you need to do as a leader came out. So we're obviously going to talk about all that, but over the last couple of years, this has actually been a very interesting question in my mind, and that is, what is the role of leadership in success? And I used the example of the New England Patriots. When Tom Brady left, the whole question was it Brady or was it the whole system? Was it Brady as a singular leadership entity, or was it that in the whole organization as a whole? So it's a fascinating conversation, and this is a perfect time to be talking to you about that.
And it's a great use case, because you look at Brady and you look at the measurables and you're like, meh, right? I mean, everybody's seen the video from him from the combine when he was 22 years old, and the guy looks like, I mean, good. He doesn't look very athletic. And all of a sudden you start to see, what are these things that he brings to the table that makes such an impact on the organization? And it's a brilliant example to start with, really, because look at what he did overnight in changing the culture and the mindset of the Bucs, which he had established over almost 20 years with the Patriots. But Brian, I go back to your example about you joining the Marine Corps, because I remember when that happened. And when I look at when you made that decision, and I reflect on that now 30 years later, it makes a lot of sense to me because of how I emulated a lot of what you demonstrated as a leader. And you think about creating a clear vision, creating a strategic plan to achieve that vision, building up people around you, being a humble servant, like all these things that I saw in you. And it was really no surprise that was the thing that took you into the Marine Corps. And then I can only imagine how much you continue to learn and refine as a result of that. But I think the thing about Brady, going back to your example with Brady, at the end of the day, and you see this on my board here, permanent beta, always learning, never done. That's Brady, right?
Yeah.
Never complacent. And I will tell you working with thousands of organizations and leaders over the last 30 years, if there is one thing that I see that separates the best from the rest, it's this: permanent beta.
Yeah. And that's, that's the natural, I guess, inclination is, and it's that sort of that cycle of life is you're hungry, you get successful, you start to rest on your laurels, you get knocked off, and then you got to do it over and over again. Whereas the guys that are super successful are the ones that you never really get the rest on your laurels. There's always something else. And Conor McGregor says that all the time. He's like, there's always somebody else to fight out there.
Yeah.
Or at least he used to before he
right.
before he made like $1 bazillion.
Right. Yeah. He made $1 gazillion and then he's fought like twice in the last 4 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Classic. So, all right, let's go back to you at Hopkins.
Yeah.
So
yep.
So take me through your senior year. So you were one of the captains with Terry and Pete. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Terry Reardon and Peter Jacobs. Yep.
Okay. Kind of give me a little bit of that, what you kind of learned in terms of your personal leadership style, sort of the culture that was around you, and just what was that dynamic like for you?
Yeah. It was at that point in my life, one of the coolest, most meaningful events in my young life at that point, which was to be voted. And you remember this, Brian, being voted by your peers to be a captain. And that said everything for me. And it also gave me insight into what good leadership can look like. Because, I mean, Terry, all-time leading scorer in Hopkins history, right? Peter, a world team member, right? And super guys. And then, I was fast. I could run. I could do different things. I played, at one point, Petro had a long stick in my hand. I did a bunch of different things while I was at Hopkins. And there was an appreciation for how I led as well, which is a different skill set. And at the end of the day, it was trying to model that learner, not knower, right? That the idea that you keep working hard, you keep setting the standard, You keep believing and encouraging other people by modeling the way, and you try to do it the right way. It's fascinating because you and I were there during the era where we didn't win a championship. And it's a metaphor or analogy rather that I invoke all the time, Brian, to this day. And why did we not win a championship? What was it about those teams that and it's been a fascinating journey for my own psychology to go through that. And then to your question about my senior year, we were the first undefeated team going into the playoffs in, I think it was either 12 or 13 years, Hopkins team. And so it's a classic case study of, okay, well, you beat everybody and then you have a great first round game, you blow them out, you're into the quarters, you blow them out, you get into the semis, and all of a sudden somebody punches you in the mouth in the first minute and you don't know how to respond. And it's just I think about it all the time. And I think it's, again, sports being such a crucible for leadership, those teams being such a crucible for leadership. I absolutely knew, Brian, that after that senior year, that this study of leadership, this pursuit of effective leadership, the pursuit of great teams and human systems, because that's what we're talking about. Any organization is made up of human systems. And so it really was an inflection point in my career, in my life, quite frankly, to be a leader of a team like that and to have successes and failures, more importantly, along the way.
Yeah. And I'm not going to name names as far as the coaching staff, but my senior year was I think his second or third year as the Hopkins head coach. And I don't necessarily mean to ding on him, but I don't recall ever having sort of that, this is what the organization, this is, kind of that leadership pep talk. I don't recall having that there. And what was using that, it was 95, right? Was that the team that you're talking about?
That was the team. Yep.
So using that team as kind of as an example, what from your vantage point now, looking back, what do you think was the disconnect there?
So it's a great example that I tell my kids often, and teams that I've coached professionally or in the athletic realm. There was not a more talented team that year, without question. I mean, by a pretty wide margin on paper. And it's the quintessential hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And not to suggest that we didn't work hard, but could we have worked harder? You're damn right. We could have worked harder. Yeah. And we could have been better. We could have sacrificed more. We could have. And again, this is like, I have so much respect for the guys on my team. And I just think that we all would look back and say that, yeah, we could, there's always things that you could do better. Right. And on the one hand, on the other hand, Brian, is there a more just dynamic way to learn a life lesson than that too? To get knocked out in the semis when you had gone undefeated, it was, you learned a lot. And at the end of the day, I think there's some things we could, and you see it in the NCAA tournament every year in basketball too, don't you? Like the better team doesn't win. And why is that? And how much of the mind and the psychology of the athlete transcends the physical gifts. And so, I think it was sort of that. Maybe there was even an idea that we were looking past Maryland to the winner of the Syracuse game. Right. And we were well scouted for sure by Scotty Moore. So all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is your sort of textbook definition of leadership? What is that? What is leadership?
Leadership is being able to create a clear vision for where you want to go with a group of people and taking them there and inspiring them to go there with you. Right. And this is part of what I see often now, Brian, is the fact that there's this idea of the leader is the better leader is the one that's coming together. He's not hitting the beach by himself and waiting for the others to hit the beach with him. He's hitting the beach. She's hitting the beach with a team in tow, in locked arms. And the more I experience life and the more I get to work with leaders of organizations of all sizes, it's the leaders that are always about we and not me that are the ones that tend to be more successful in whatever their pursuits are. They definitely believe in that. They definitely have that humility to be able to learn. It doesn't mean not confident. It doesn't mean, in some cases, with a really big personality. That's not what that means at all. It means willing to surround yourself with people who are better than you. It's like it's either, I believe it's Thoreau, every man is my superior in some way. And in that, I learn of him, right? People rally around that kind of leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want to be around it.
And so is that, and this is probably the whole crux of it all, is can somebody who maybe grew up not playing team sports and maybe wasn't necessarily exposed to a dynamic where, you're in a locker room and you're constantly being judged by your friends and there's a lot of razzing and all those sorts of things that make you tougher, is a leadership with somebody who has never gone through that? Is there a natural aspect to leadership?
I do think there is an intrinsic ability to rally people around you. Now, I'm not saying dispositively that it can't be learned. And some people take a meandering path to get there, for sure.
Yeah.
But we used to say, Brian, where it's like that person has it, they've got it. Like that person just gets it, or they have it. I think there's an intrinsic factor for some people that they just have it. Like to your point about Brady has it. Now you look at some other leaders. In fact, some of my clients are of this ilk. They have taken a very different path. And not participated in team sports and weren't a part of clubs or broader teams. And yet they have their mindset is one of learning and being able to synthesize and high levels of emotional intelligence to where they've been able to sort of put that mosaic together. I've seen it both ways. And thankfully, right? Because then we wouldn't have that diversity of thought and thinking that everybody had to come through some team dynamic in order to be an effective leader. Now, I will tell you, brother, like I'm rooting for those people because I know who they are. Like I know what that tribe is, right? And I have respect for it. But I also have come to really learn and appreciate this idea of someone who takes that nonlinear path to leadership.
Yeah.
Right. And they've done it. And maybe even more kudos to them, quite frankly, because they have really pulled that knowledge and that experience and that wisdom from different pockets.
Yeah. And as I was kind of reflecting on that before our conversation here, the guy that came to my mind is Elon Musk. And I respect the heck out of him. I think what he's doing is just awesome. But he's kind of one of these singular type of individuals, a little bit off center, it's kind of one of those little oddballs and sort of made everything he is nowadays kind of because of his smarts and all those sorts of things. But now he's running this massive organization, not only Tesla, but also the whole SpaceX and all of that requires a serious team to do all that. So obviously it can happen. It would just be that would be a very interesting exercise to kind of get in his head and try to figure out how he had to, what was his transition like to be able to do that.
Absolutely. What a fascinating dude. I mean, holy cow. And you asked about permanent beta. Here's what's crazy. You just mentioned SpaceX and Tesla. And dude, he got the whole thing started in PayPal.
I know.
So it's remarkable. It's arguably the most impactful and far-reaching entrepreneurial resume that we've ever seen. Right? Yeah. No one's come up with 3 multi-billion-dollar organizations, right? But interestingly, one of that PayPal mafia was Reid Hoffman, who started LinkedIn and has been a wildly successful investor. Well, that's the first time I ever heard permanent beta was from Reid Hoffman, who has a great podcast called Masters of Scale. And but Brian, to your question about the transitioning that he had to do to go from PayPal to Tesla to SpaceX, it's remarkable. And I'm so grateful, quite frankly, for people like him who just push us to rethink. Yeah. He takes on these big problems.
Yeah.
Like, thank God for that. Because I'm not signing up to do earth boring drills or, traveling to Mars. I'm not, but thankfully he's pushing us to be better. And, this is sort of part and parcel with permanent beta, which is I am going to rethink. I'm going to challenge my own biases and perceptions of things, or what I can and can't do. And it's a remarkable example that you raised with him. I'm fascinated by him, regardless of where you land on his, his beliefs outside of his businesses. Because Peter Thiel's another one. Yeah. Thiel's done some ridiculous things.
Yeah. Everybody thinks of JFK and the famous speech where he talks about in 10 years, we're going to land a man on the moon and how forward thinking and the leadership it took to do that. And then actually start the process. That's kind of exactly how I see Musk. I mean, he was, one of these just brilliant minds, obviously super successful in terms of the PayPal and all of those things. But then he said, I've got a vision, come on board. And a lot of people came on board and they're making it happen. So it's obviously he's been able to make that jump from, just kind of doing it my way or the highway. And this is how it's going to be done to, this is my vision. This is what I'm passionate about. Obviously people are attracted to that passion and are working for him. And obviously they're doing great things. And that kind of brings up, when you talk about young kids as they sort of grow up in terms of leadership styles, and I'm just kind of reflecting on my own experience, it was always that you kind of lead by example. You just, the example of how you work and how you play on the field of athletics, of sports, which is primarily where I learned all this. And it was kind of that I just was so in love with what I was doing. I was working so hard at it and I was so passionate about it that I just wanted everybody to kind of, whether they were just watching or whatever the case may be, and so there's that leadership style. Then there's sort of the rah leadership style. And then there's that vision where this is where this is some crazy idea that I have and we're going to make it happen.
Yeah. So. Well said. And those are varying styles, right? And it is, and I've seen different styles work, but there has to be some through line, regardless of that particular style of leadership. And some of that through line has to be this idea of being a learner. It has to have some level of humility in terms of being willing to take on somebody else's idea. And it also requires decentralized command. No, I have yet to see an effective CEO, and most of my clients are CEOs. I have yet to see an effective CEO who does not have that next level leadership, Brian, that is on point, right? Yeah. Just amazing people. It seems like that is a hand in glove situation. That is a through line for all the different styles. If you can get that part right, you're winning most of the time.
Yeah. And that's exactly how the Marine Corps operates, which is, getting back to my point of there's a science to it. And that's definitely it. Now, the question is, have you ever had a CEO that has come to you and say, hey, listen, dude, I can't figure this out. And then you kind of figure out by talking to that person that that's his problem or her problem. And they just can't emotionally, mentally get over that and they fail. Is that ever happened where somebody can't make that jump to giving up that control and to your subordinates?
100%. I'm thinking of a specific example. Obviously, I won't name any names, but this happened to a client of mine in Northern Virginia. And it was the inability of the CEO to evolve. Because at the end of the day, an organization only has one vision, and it's the CEO's, and one strategic plan, and it's the CEO's. Now, that doesn't mean that it hasn't been contributed to largely and vetted and developed by the full team. Right. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. And if you cannot evolve to where you are actively seeking the opinions and insights of your team, you will lose. You will lose. And I've seen it, and it's not pretty, because what happens is there's an entrenchment that happens in a particular paradigm, and they're going to die on that hill. And, maybe we could have, the command and control used to work. It doesn't work anymore.
Now, is that ego? Is that fear? What drives that?
It can be ego. In this particular instance, it was fear. It was the fear of being uncomfortable. Right. And what I was trying to, and we ultimately served the organization very well, but I always reflect on what could I do better there. And in that particular case, I wish that I had done maybe a more effective job at getting that person to not be so wed to these inherent biases, and be more bold in shirking some of that paradigm that she had cloaked herself in. And it was tough. It was tough, but all for the greater good, because as change is hard, Brian, that change takes time. And so when you go through a change management exercise, boy, it feels painful at first, but then as you start to see that incremental progress, and this is especially true where there's a change in the CEO or the executive leadership team, boy, then you get some momentum, and then it's a powerful fuel.
You see the consultant, are you level become their counselor as well? I mean, it must get deep, because you're opening up some serious shit that they probably didn't even realize was impacting them negatively.
Have to, man. Have to, right? And look, everybody, every leader in today's professional world, whether it's for profit or not for profit, needs a coach. And look, if you look at however you would define success, if you look at your definition, that success paradigm, and find those leaders who are in that realm and tell me if they've got a coach, the answer is going to be uniformly yes. Why? Not to be a cheerleader, not to be a critic, but to see the best version of themselves and help them get there. And so no one's coming into that situation with all the answers, but you can ask really good questions. You can be an amazing listener. You can share a lot of stories and analogies. You can come with a gravitas of experience and perspective. How can you not, that's going to make you better. Yeah. If you receive that, that's going to make you better. Now that's on the coaching side. And very much, Brian, you are a therapist as much as anything else, because it's lonely at the top. And a lot of times they have no space. They don't create space, or they haven't availed themselves of the space to think, to stop, to let their minds wander, to vent. And so it's really an interesting role that you do play. And again, it often becomes the catalyst for then getting into the organization in a more intentional way, and then going to resolve the issues that they have. Yeah. Right. And so it's a gift, man. It's a gift, because every day, what are we working on? Being a better version of ourselves, making our team better, and having the ability to do that is very gratifying.
And is it sort of like a one-time boot camp that you have for these CEOs, or are you on like a monthly meeting type of is that how it works?
I'm a retainer model. And so my clients retain me for months, and in some cases years, the more business achievement work that I do, some would describe it as like the management consulting or organizational development work. That is usually, that would not go for more than a year typically. But the coaching relationships,
Yeah.
those can go on for as long as you're creating value. And as long as my team is creating value, we can be there for a long time.
Yeah.
And then, as the organization changes, there might be a need for us to come back in more substantively beyond coaching to help with some of that achievement work that I call it.
It's funny. I've worked with a coach kind of for the last probably 8 months, and we just kind of finished up, and it was a really, I enjoyed the hell out of it. But up until then, and I think this is a very immature way of looking at it, was I always thought of, a coach as he needed to have some street cred in my mind for whatever it was that I was looking for. I needed to know that he had been there, done it, and I was actually going to learn something from him. And that is actually, obviously that's not the reality of the situation. And you just use a perfect example. Tiger Woods has a swing coach. The guy obviously is not as good a golfer as Tiger Woods, right, but he helps Tiger Woods, like you said, be the better version of himself. And so it took me a while to get over myself. That whole street cred has been such an ingrained part of my being that it was tough for me to take on somebody who may not even be in the same industry I'm in.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brian. And that's a real thing. I think that this is a bias that we bring to the dance, right? It's like, I can only work with somebody who's had multiple exits. Why? Like, what is that? So that's a bias that you have. And why is that? And of course you want there to be, what goes back to value creation. I need to help you be better in the ways that you are seeking to be better. And so I can either do that or I can't, right? And so, yes, it does help with the leadership background in sports and in business. It helps to have been an operator of businesses. I think that's something that a lot of consultants miss, especially at the big shops, where what have they done to run a business? They haven't. And again, I'm bringing some bias to that too. Does that mean they can't be a great consultant? No. And that is something, those are kind of battle scars that you can't find anywhere else. You can't find it in your MBA program, and you can't find it in, the four walls of McKinsey. You've got to do it. And so it's an example there, not to suggest that, there's not the most amazing lifers at McKinsey, but it's just an example of the street cred is a thing. And we can't have that bias so ingrained that we miss out on a relationship that can create massive value for us. But you mentioned Tiger Woods. Hank Haney came out this week and said one of the things he was fascinated in working with, he was a swing coach for 6 years, and he won 6 majors during that time. He said that the fascinating thing to him was that when Tiger had a driving range session, it was flawless. And then he'd take it to the course, and Tiger, he had flawless rounds, but a lot of times he was spraying it, right? Or something. And Hank Haney was fascinated by the fact that Tiger Woods, greatest of all time, arguably, would have these impeccable range sessions and then have a scramble in his round. Like, what's that about? It's amazing. It's fascinating. But a coach doesn't have to be better than you at your thing. They have to create, even if it's asynchronous, some value for you, some learning that you can package up and take to your team or make you better.
Yeah. Well, and that's fascinating because we're human. We're not robots.
Right.
And of course, in Tiger's case, the guy had like 15,000 people walking around. He was, so the amount of exterior stressors going on his round, and that's what blows my mind about people that operate at such that high level, that they're able to keep that together.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, it's remarkable. That level of achievement, that level of tension, and this is a good analogy or a metaphor for being the CEO of a small to mid market business, which is you have got to be able to create your own boundaries. You've got to be able to say no. There's a classic phrase that I use a lot with my CEO clients, which is only do what only you can do. And I learned that from a friend of mine, Spencer Deering, former UNC Tar Heel. But he shared that with me one time from his experience with his father, who sat on many boards of public companies. And he said to the CEOs, only do what only you can do. And that's great, because what does that mean? That means you've got decentralized command, and you are only focused your highest and best time on the highest and best priorities. And that is you've got to be able to create a little bit of margin. It was some of the best advice I ever got, Brian, was have margin in your life, financially, time, relationships. Like, you have to have margin in your life. And this is especially true for those people who are operating at a high level all the time. You can get burnt out.
Yeah.
And,
and so crazy. What the margin, what you're talking about there is have some time where you're not stressed out because you're right at the razor's edge.
That's right.
Is that what you're, okay.
Yeah. And in fact, almost tactical, to where your calendar literally has it in your calendar for either some routine and ritual that you have, that whether it's meditation, yoga, breathing, running, exercising, playing basketball, whatever it is, that is sacred.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me how hard it is for CEOs to take action and do that, because all of those that do it are like, that saved my life. That little tweak saved my life. And that's the margin I'm talking about, Brian.
Yeah. So let's go kind of this. So this is, as you're talking, it's just, this is what we learned in the Marine Corps. And that was the idea of just top down or decentralized leadership, where you've got the commanding officer, then you've got the division officers, then below them you've got the section officers, and then below them you got the 3 or 4 guys that work together as a unit, and they all understand exactly what they need to do. But at each level, there's some flexibility to do what you need to do to make sure that big goal gets. So how is it tough for people who've never been in maybe on a sports team or in the military? Is it tough for them to sort of embrace that? And how do you train that into people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've seen this particularly show up in an acute way over the last 2 years, because there's a lot of first-time leaders and managers that have come to their roles during the pandemic. And no one has ever led or managed in a time like this. It's a uniquely, to our generation, it's a unique set of circumstances. And I try to simplify it, Brian. And what I've used for the last couple of years that has gotten some traction with folks who don't have maybe the backgrounds that you or I might have is I use alliteration and I use the power of 3, right? So for me, what's worked a lot in helping new leaders is care, clarity, connection. Care, clarity, connection. In this world of the hybrid workplace, work from anywhere, work from home, work from the office, and just some of the trauma that people have been dealing with over the course of the last 2 years, I tell these new leaders, if you can look at your week at the beginning and at the end and say, does my team know I care? Did they feel the care from me and from my next level leadership this week? Okay, good. And we can talk more about how that shows up. But 2, was I clear? Because clarity takes anxiety off the table on a lot of things, right? Something as simple as clarity. Am I clear about what we're trying, our priorities this week? Am I clear about the role that you have and how it connects to the vision? Are we clear on, your pathway in this organization? That's it's like a touchstone for them. And then the last one is connection. Do we have these rhythms in place where we can connect? We have a good cadence of talking, of meeting, of Zooming, whatever it is, so that we have a connection. Do we have systems that allow us to collaborate and coordinate on the strategic priorities? So that is obviously an oversimplification. However, it's nice in the midst of these harrowing weeks that these leaders have to be able to keep it as a true north.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, the website's www.steer.com. Talking with Chris Steer, the president of Steer LLC. And if this sounds like it's something that a small to mid-sized CEO might benefit from, www.steerllc.com. If you like what we're doing here, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll keep the great content coming. So one of the things that and I'm just going to, I've been thinking a lot about all the sort of leadership positions I had in the Marine Corps, and they weren't anything special, but they were a small unit where I had, probably 50 people that I was responsible for. And a couple of things that I did that I wasn't necessarily told to do, but based on what I knew the mission was, it seemed like the right thing to do. And a couple of them were, this kind of will lead into the next question I have for you. The first thing I did when I first got this position, and it was the airframes department in the squadron that I was in, and the airframers are the guys that actually fix the airplanes or the helicopters in my case. And the first thing I did was to interview all the kids, and you're talking, anywhere from 20 to 26-year-old kids, and I gave them a relatively personal questionnaire. And I don't know if you can actually do this in the civilian world or not, but it was a relatively personal questionnaire, because I wanted to know their birthday. I wanted to know if they had kids and what their wedding anniversary, things like that. And so I did that. The field that we were operating out of was far enough away from the action where you could get away. Things might not be as, you may not understand exactly what it is that we're doing over there, but we were close enough to the situation where every once in a while something would be lobbed into the base and a bomb would go off. And then you realize, okay, we're actually really close to the shit. And so what I would do on a regular basis was I would get the whole 40 kids together, and I call them kids, 40 Marines together. And I'd break out a map and just show them, this is where we are. Those bombs that you heard the other day, this is where they were going. And the helicopter that came back with the bullets in it, this is where he was fighting. And so I was just trying to give them just an idea of what the bigger picture was, so that they realize that, when they go out there in the middle of the night and it's windy and it's nasty out and they've got to fix that helicopter, this is the reason why they are fixing it. And then the last thing I did, and this is probably the greatest thing I ever did, was I had two senior enlisted guys that actually ran the day-to-day operations. And I was like, you guys can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And they were just studs. So the question is, can you get that personal in today's world? Are the employees as focused on, or do the employees know intrinsically, like a Marine knows intrinsically, your boss tells you to do something, you got to do it. Yeah. So what's that like in the civilian world, those two things?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I could hear you. I could listen to you talk about some of, your examples of leadership and your stories. You've always been a gifted storyteller, Brian. It's interesting because the lines have really blurred. It's really interesting. We weren't even measuring things like employee engagement until like 15, 20 years ago. It's a very novel social science. And wouldn't you remember back in the old Jack Welch days, it's like, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and then you had Peter Drucker. The biggest driver of performance is the human resource, and we just took that as like at face value as like, oh yeah, that's probably true. But now it's overwhelmingly backed by data, right? And so I think this goes to the crux of your question, which is we are bringing more and more of our full selves to work these days. And so what does that mean? That means our employees are bringing their full selves to work these days. And so there's an old axiom that I use in talking to my leaders and managers about this. I say, do you know your people or do you know about your people?
And which one's more important?
Do you know your people?
Gotcha.
Right. And this is to your point about, hey guys, let me show you what's going on. This is you're taking the time. This goes back to the care piece. And this is a trust builder, by the way. When you are demonstrating that real authenticity, that real empathy, and then with your example, the third leg of that stool, Brian, is logic. Like, here's why we're here. Here's what's happening, right? That trust triangle is a powerful driver of engagement. But I'll try to be more direct in the answer. It's, you can know your people. There's boundaries, of course, but you can have your people feel cared for in the systems that you have set up and the manner in which you approach them. Can they assume positive intent about you, right? Because if people can assume positive intent from their leadership, there's a lot of relationship capital there that we can trade off of, right? And we can hold people accountable. We can get people inspired when they are assuming positive intent, that you have their backs. Yeah. It's a funny expression, right? But it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Do you have each other's back? Do you have your team's backs? Because there's one of the individuals I do enjoy listening to, and he's been leveraging LinkedIn probably better than any human ever, which is Gary Vaynerchuk, and Gary V, as he's known. And he says this all the time. He goes, the CEO works for the rest of the team. The rest of the team doesn't work for the CEO. CEO works for them. And in many respects, that's true. But you can you can have some serious firepower if you can establish that relationship like you had with your team of Marines, when you can connect with them at a level that you know them. You don't just know about them.
Yeah. One of the things I could have done better when I look back on it is, like, I would walk into the shop and there might be 10 or 11 guys kind of sitting around. Everyone else is out there working. And I'd be like, hey, Lance Corporal so-and-so, happy birthday. And then all of a sudden they jump on him. They're, yeah, happy birthday, and then they're razzing him, and he's getting all this crazy, or she's getting all this crazy attention. I think in retrospect, I probably would have said, hey, Lance Corporal so-and-so, come on outside real quick. And then said happy birthday to him. So, my good intention got them, razz for the rest of the afternoon type of thing. So,
hey, Brian, what would you say from your leadership in the Marine Corps? What has been the most, the leadership traits, or the leadership, the leadership characteristics that have transcended into your civilian life now, the ones that are most pronounced from your time as a Marine Corps leader to now leading your own business and your own teams?
Yeah, no, I think it's that idea of having that connection with the people that you're working with. Mm-hmm. That's outside of whatever it is that you're doing, so that you can text him or give him a call and say happy birthday or happy anniversary or something. It's just that. And it's funny because I do this, and I try to do it with I do it with most all my friends. And at some point, actually, if I see you over that March weekend back at Hopkins, I'll try it on you as well, unless you're ready to give the information up right now. Yeah. Is I'll just randomly ask them, maybe we're having dinner or drinks or whatever. When's your birthday? What's your anniversary? What are your kids' birthdays? Yeah. And then when I'm away, I'll plug it into my phone. So literally when it pops up, it's just a quick, and just something that, just that basic, that goes a long way from what I've seen. And then obviously, I think one of the major things, and this kind of goes back to that original point that I made earlier, and that is you actually have to know what you're doing so that people can see that you actually are, that you're coming from a place where there's some experience in what we're trying to do, et cetera. So, but I think the biggest one, and this is, I looking back, this is probably what I've done the best and the most of my life, is getting to know the people that I'm technically leading. And it goes back to you in freshman year. I had the exact same thing happen to seniors when I was a freshman. So I was just taking what I saw as was the tradition of that organization and just stepping in to do my, that's just one more cog in the wheel, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the biggie, I think, is and the older I get, the more, I guess, the less ego I put into things. And it's funny because Mimi and I were on vacation a couple of years ago, and we stopped off in this kind of really hippie little art gallery. And it was kind of it was a co-op. So everyone, every artist had to sit behind the counter, whatever. And so this old dude just happened to be behind the counter, and he said something that in the course of our conversation that has really impacted me. And that is, he said, sometimes you just got to sit back and say, I actually may be wrong in this situation. And that's all ego. And if you can let go of that, and I feel like I've tried very hard to do that, and it's actually an enlightening way of looking at things.
It's brilliant, man. It's spot on, man. Spot on. You imagine what you can do if you didn't worry about your ego. If that was, it's limitless, and it's cool the way you tell that story. I could be wrong about this, and I love it when I'm working with very enlightened leaders, and they say things like, hey, help me understand. Like, they don't come at somebody thinking that they had the right answer. Like, help me understand what you were thinking here, because I'm either not quite getting it or I just might be wrong.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly vulnerable. It's incredibly humbling. It opens up the dialogue. Look, you want the best ideas to win. The idea is the customer. Okay. And so you shouldn't be the jackass that, as the CEO or the leader, that's putting their pride in the way of progress.
Yeah.
It's like, take your ego out of it. I guarantee it's never done you any good. Right?
And does it take a while for your clients to get to that point? Or are they, when they come to you, are they in trouble? Is it like a kind of like a business rescue type of thing? Or is it more like, when are you getting these CEOs?
Yeah, that's the rare one, Brian. If it's someone who's really in a tight spot. I have a relatively new client who found herself in a tight spot with her growing business, and it was like a lifeline kind of thing, like, help me now. But most of them come through through referrals from clients, through my network, which is national in nature, and just word of mouth. I have a presence on LinkedIn. I've got, but it's not. It's a presence. It's affirming. It's confirming that I have the skill set that you may be looking for, right? But at the end of the day, it's not typically that acute. My business is on the brink of disaster situation. It's like, I want to be better. What am I missing?
Yeah.
Can you give me some perspective? Can help me approach even something tactical, Brian? Like, sometimes it'll be, hey, look, I really could use you to help me build out my growth plan or my strategic plan for 2022. That could be the way that it starts, right? And then we go from there. And what I love about the small to mid-market is that the impact is much more readily ascertainable, right? We've set the mark, we set the KPIs, we know what we're trying to do, and there's tangible and intangible. Like, I love it when we hit these lagging indicators or some of these other KPIs. But I love it just as much, if not more, when the CEO is just like, I just feel better. Right? I feel better, man. This is great. Like, can we talk more often? No, and of course that's more than intangible, but you see my point.
Yeah.
It's like, look, man, life's too short, man. Right? Life's too short. We all got to try to have more fun, and God knows we're working so much. We got to have more fun doing that too.
Yeah. Yeah. What, how have you changed kind of your business model or your coaching / training model over the last couple of years with all the insanity out there?
Yeah, man, it's pretty remarkable. It is like, Brian, it's almost like a new social contract, not a new work contract, right? Yeah. Where elements, the terms and conditions of the new work contract feel very different than they did 3 years ago. You know what I mean? And we've got these, we're again going back to my commentary around so much more of the full self and so much more of the full society coming into the four walls of the organization. There's an opaqueness to work and to life outside of work, right? That's not as clear. And so there is definitely more of a concerted effort on the human systems side of working. It's, better understanding and input from team members, understanding this crazy world of hybrid work, understanding the impact of DE&I on their businesses, right? Understanding what it means to have a thriving business that adheres to the impacts of the Me Too movement, right? It's people-centric, man. Everything is much more human system-centric than it was even 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot more emotional labor now, and people are struggling with that.
In what way?
Well, it's becoming, people don't, and I think this has been a revelation for some leaders. It's exhausting when you are in your head on every single decision at work and how you lead, right? And so what we try to separate is the real work, the meaningful work, and the emotional labor that we can sort of push off to the side or try to minimize.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can do that with a mindset and your own psychology. You can do that with some better systems and process. You can do that by hiring better people. But we're trying to reduce some of that emotional labor because at the end of the day, I hear a lot of this. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. And that's not just your frontline staff. That's you, the leader, right? I'm burnt out. And it's almost that same kind of fatigue as we feel after, a 3-hour Homewood Field practice. It's like, hey, I'm depleted.
Yeah.
I'm depleted.
Interesting. Because obviously the cancel culture, the woke, just all this stuff that's these extra layers of things now that people have to deal with. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. These are novel circumstances. This is a novel time to lead. And it's never been harder to relentlessly prioritize. Right. And so we need better leaders in these times.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not for the weary. It ain't for the weak of heart.
Well, I guess that's a good point. Successful businesses, if it was easy,
exactly,
everybody would do it.
That's
and
right.
So are you finding that just in general, are people not wanting to take that risk because of that?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I am seeing fear decisions rather than growth decisions.
Really?
And in fear decisions, what happens? You choose safety and security.
Yeah.
You're like, you know what? I'm doing all right in this role. I got this licked. I can do this I can sort of do this for the next 10 years. I'm good. right? And what is that? Like, we gotta understand that, because that might just be a fear decision and not a growth decision. And everything you want is on the other side of fear. That's a statement that I've said for years, right?
Yeah.
What is it that you're scared of? Well, let's push beyond that. Like,
Yeah.
don't you want to know what's on the other side of that? Because I guarantee it's better.
Yeah. Dude, that's funny because we've been watching on National Geographic Channel that Earth series with Will Smith.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things that in the first episode, his grandmother used to say that God created all the best things on the other side of fear.
Mm.
So, but I mean, that's the human animal. It takes a certain type of individual that's willing that has the guts to do that.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And not to sacrifice your own psychology. Mark Andreessen, the acclaimed investor from California, Andreessen Horowitz, he will say this: the hardest thing for any CEO is to manage their own psychology. And I believe it. Like, I see it. And it's true. And which is why, and this is interesting, man. 3 years ago, I would not spend as much time as I do working with my clients on their own psychology, on their own self-care. And here we are doing a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, so that's a good place to step into it. So specifically, what are some of the things that you do? Like I assume there's an intake interview. I assume there's probably some kind of a syllabus, and then what's your MO with these individuals?
In the coaching realm, I have a proven methodology to ensure that there are certain things that we understand effective leadership to be. And I sort of bucket them out, Brian, between like self-development, organizational leadership, and team development, sort of like that. And then there's a strategic priority portion there. Those are buckets, but it's a parameters that allows us to move around within those four areas, Brian, because I would never prescribe, because that's fool's gold, right? Take my program and you'll guarantee to hit all your KPIs in 6 months. That's garbage. It's garbage, right? I have a great team of people. We have a lot of perspective and wisdom, but you are the most important part of this. And so help us understand what you're trying to achieve, and we will help you become that best version of yourself and of your organization. We will do it. And here's how we will do it. That's what the coaching looks like. Okay. Now, on to the business achievement. That is definitely more rigorous in terms of a protocol and a process.
Yeah.
Right. And there is a business achievement playbook that we work through. That doesn't mean it's rigid to the point of suffocating good ideas or new paths or better. But yeah, so we definitely have an intake insofar as I want to spend time with you first. I want to understand what makes you tick. I want to understand, am I even the right guy for you? I might not be. And so we want to get to that part first. And then we either take on a coaching role, executive advisor, leadership advisor role, or we will get into the organization, get our hands a little bit dirtier with some of the business achievement work.
Yeah. And I assume most of the stuff is done Zoom phone calls, or is it in person? What's the sort of makeup right now?
In today's world, it's probably 70-30. Yeah. 70 through video, 30 in person. And that depends on the client relationship, depends on the location, the geography of the client.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're still definitely in this world of heavy video. And by the way, it can be extraordinarily effective.
Yeah. And sorry, continue.
No, go.
Yeah.
Go.
I was going to say it's amazing from when it first started, when the whole Zoom thing and the conference video calls, everyone was like on pins and needles. And now and this is actually crazy. And I personally think it's probably to our detriment, it's just completely normal now.
I know.
Whereas I would much rather be sitting across the table having a beer with you doing this conversation.
100%, man.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And isn't it amazing how the brain the brain chemistry and the rewiring happens so quickly?
Yeah.
Isn't it remarkable? It's remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I continue to be just shocked by the elasticity of the human brain, but also, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, the finite nature. Because I will say, for our CEOs or for just, man on the street, there's a lot of inputs.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we haven't gone past the point where we're upside down on our ability to process it all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's coming. I mean, just tack on the whole social media. It's insane.
Oh, it's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So, if you have, let's say you have a long-term sort of coaching client, is it a once a week call? Is it a once a month? What's sort of your program?
The coaching protocol is twice a month, and they're either 60 to 90 minutes each session. And then I have a project management tool that I use called Trello, which is really intuitive, very clean. I love it. Big plug for Trello there. We are able to interact and engage in between sessions. And so, as you said, Brian, it's like you develop the relationship. They know that there's genuine care, and I'm desperately trying to create value for them. So they have my text, they have my phone number, right? When they've got big decisions, they will call me up. And I love that because that's value. They feel like it's enough of a relationship of value that they will call me in a tight situation. So that's great. But typically 2 sessions a month, Trello in between. We also do some brainstorming on an app called MindMeister, which is like a mind mapping tool, which is wonderful. And I use another tool called Loom, which is a video app. So I can be on my screen, sharing my screen, and it's just my little face in the corner explaining what I'm talking them through, and I can just send them that video. It's really cool.
Yeah, nice.
But those are really the tools that drive the coaching relationship. And it's been wonderful. The feedback has been really good on the use of the tools. And so it's almost like you're technology anchored in the work.
Yeah. And do you have other coaches on your staff, or what's your staff look like?
So I have an unbelievable assortment of gifted people that help me, both from an operational effectiveness, but also from an expertise. So, for example, if I have a member of my team who is a absolute expert in digital media and digital marketing, okay, I'm dangerous with that stuff, but I don't know nearly as much as he does. And so when a client requires that, I pull that resource in and boom, we go at it together.
Yeah.
It's an example. And I have a couple of folks like that who just have, like, why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
Well, I want to make sure that my client has the very best thinking that I can find for them. And fortunately, because now I'm knocking on the door of 50, I've accumulated some really good relationships.
I pegged you for like 55, 56.
So I've accumulated some really valuable relationships that want to help fill those roles, so that we are again, I go back to this basic unit economic theory, Brian. Create value, capture value, right? Like, I just want to keep it on, so that there's never any doubt about whether the partnership that we had was valuable.
Yeah. Dude, don't tell anybody, but I never took an economics class at Hopkins.
How did you not take econ?
Dude, I did the bare minimum to get out of there in 4 years.
Dude, were you SNBS or?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
But a lot more BS than S.
more BS than S. Yeah.
But for, again, just kind of touching on my personal experience, I think it was my fall of probably spring of junior year is when I figured out that I wanted to join the military. And one of the things that kind of tipped me off to that, because I had tried when I was in high school to go to the Naval Academy, didn't get in because I didn't take econ in high school either. So you can sort of, my grades were not my strong point, but so I'd always knew that I kind of wanted to try the military, but as you know, we get to Hopkins and it's all lacrosse all the time. And that was the main focus. And just so happened that one, it had to have been either fall of my senior year that I ran into a recruiter at one of the cafeterias on campus, and we just hit it off. And at the time, I had been kind of looking into the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and knowing that I had wanted to fly, was asking me, hey, what's the process of doing this? And they said, well, you've got to be an engineer major. And I was like, well, fuck, I'm not, if I didn't take any econ classes, I definitely wasn't taking engineering classes. And so I get to the Marine Corps, and you know what the guy says to me? And this maybe kind of ties into all of this, is that he's like, actually, you know what? I'm more impressed that you're the captain of the team than I am with your grades. He goes, we'll teach you what we need you to know. Those intangibles are more important to us. And so, so that was how that started.
Oh man, that's awesome. It's like hire for culture. You can teach skills, right? Yeah. Like that is God's honest truth.
Yeah.
It's a great story, man.
I'm just curious. Do you have former military guys as clients that are CEOs?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And do you see a difference between them and maybe somebody who's just kind of been a civilian all their life in terms of leadership styles, or being comfortable in that leadership position of being the CEO?
It's a really good question. I would say my experience yields the following sort of impromptu analysis. Those that have military leadership experience are usually on point or ahead of pace when it comes to operational success, right? Like lagging indicator driven, good process. Okay, number one. Number two, they also tend to lead the pack when it comes to the inspiration piece, because you do have to be a chief storyteller, right? And then where it's more of a mixed bag is on the, as you might guess, going from military to civilian life and leading members of the military versus leading members of the civilian population. It's a bit of a mixed bag on whether they lead the pack or in the middle of the pack in terms of people engagement, right? The talent development. That is that, so hopefully I'm answering your question.
No, I was just curious because it's, it's something that, do they teach? And I know the answer to this because they do, but how good or how well is it taught in like business schools and MBAs and that sort of thing? Is that part of the curriculum, leadership?
It's becoming more and more a part of every curriculum.
Yeah.
It's remarkable when, and at the graduate level, it happens a lot with more agility than it does at the undergraduate level.
What does that mean?
Meaning
agility.
The ability to switch curriculum faster to suit today's graduate.
Gotcha.
I think that, the modern, even though the numbers are all trailing down in terms of graduate school enrollment, it's the way and manner in which they've adapted to society today, what business leaders need to be more abreast of. It is interesting to see how quickly they can do that.
Yeah. Do you have in your client base, do you have people that maybe don't have any formal education or any formal training that are now find themselves CEOs of companies, and how do they do? And
absolutely. One of my all-time favorite clients who's still with me, self-made, no formal schooling, total ass kicker, great human being, knows how to lead, puts his people first. And you're like, wow, this is pretty cool. Like this is intrinsic.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back right here, buddy. Like goes back to permanent beta, man. Like he is a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
And he never lets his ego dictate. So that's one of those stories, Brian, where it's that, boy, this guy was built from day one to be starting and running businesses.
Yeah. And did he play sports and growing up?
He did not.
Really? So that's where you really go, okay.
Yeah.
He had that little spark in him. Interesting.
And he hustled his ass off.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep.
Wow. Love it, dude. So what's the future hold for Steer LLC?
The future is impact. I want to continue to have this I'm hesitant to use the word elite, but this cadre of value creators on my team doing what we love to do, which is helping leaders and businesses be better at what they do, right? That is a blessing.
Yeah.
To be able to do that, right? And so we just want to continue to do that, having fun, creating impact, being profitable, having, being able to have the margin to do what we want to do. There's an old Picasso quote, at least that's where the attribution goes to Picasso. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. And I feel like we're in that realm right now with Steer LLC, is that we know what our gifts are and we just love giving it away to the world. Yeah.
I love it, dude. It's awesome, man.
Yeah. I'm really grateful for the forum, Brian, to be able to be able to talk through this stuff. And it especially means something talking to you about this, given your role in my life as a leader. And I'm looking forward to when we go off camera and off recording about a couple of the first things you did say to me that are unfit for air.
Gotcha. Well, I tell you, dude, it's it's that whole playing that level of college sports was a trip. Sure was.
Unbelievable. An amazing experience. Yeah. One that was so instrumental in shaping me, and just making me more equipped for this world. There's no question about it.
Yep.
And it's like I think often about, and I've been talking to this with my clients a lot recently, from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about stimulus and response, right? Because he says there's a space between stimulus and response. And in that space is all of your growth, all of your joy, all of your peace, because you can choose how to respond. You choose how to fill that space. And so our joy and our happiness and our peace is actually not tied to the stimulus at all. It's in our response to it.
Yeah.
That's a mind bender.
Yep.
And once you can really embrace that, and I think back to our time at Hopkins, there was a lot of stimulus and it wasn't all good, but it was how you responded to it that shaped and formed and just, real gold there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Chris Steer LLC, coaching, development. It's all good, my brother. Listen, man, I really appreciate the time. This was a really cool conversation for a timeless concept of leadership. And we see examples of it, both good and bad, out there. And I really appreciate it, brother.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you, my friend.
All right. Hey, let me close off by saying, if you're in the military, the police, first responders, fire departments, if that's you out there, thank you very much for your service. Stay safe. This is the Rain Man. Chris, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take, Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.